initially, I thought a conditional use permit would be appropriate. And in a conditional use, we as council would have to come up with what those conditions are to approve it, so this is a one-off. However, my big concern is, once we do this, do we now have to bring in conditional use on the existing Crittenden storage that's there on Highway 25, just a couple of doors up from Todd's house? I don't know if we're open a can of worms on a second business to help the first one, if you see what I'm saying.
I would think the one that's been there for the last 25 plus years, they, under any circumstances, they would grandfather in and probably wouldn't be covered under this conditional use. I think he's safe.
Todd, I think we've got to find that out. I don't know.
Once a use is
established, not a conditional use permit because it's non-conforming. I don't know.
Once a lawful use is established, it can continue until such time as it changes or it's lost. If you were to change that to a use that is non-conforming, he would then lose it. But as long as he continues it as a storage unit and it was lawful at the time it was established, it can continue. It doesn't have to be subject to anything else, conditional use or otherwise. The problem, I have to agree with Paula on this one. If you change this ordinance, then it becomes an administrative act for the next person who wants to put in storage units. I understand what you're saying, Danny, about him being able to fix this one up, but that doesn't mean that the next guy with the same zoning can come in and ask for a storage unit permit, and you can't turn him down if it is a permitted use, so long as he meets the other conditions of the zone. As to the conditional use, yeah, we lose that. Once we say it's a conditional use, then it's the Board of Adjustments that administers it from that point forward, not us. So
that's why I wish Nancy would have been here, where she could have turned around and be able to say yes about this building already being, the building's already there. I don't understand why he can't use it.
He can use it so long as he uses it for permitted use, but you can't say he can use it for a use that's not permitted and then not let other people do it. That's called spot zoning, and that's illegal. So
Joe, or no, Jim.
yes.
So what you're saying is, if we were to let Mr. Dalton rehab this building and turn it into a storage unit, we're opening up a door. Would an original, say I want to turn my house into a storage unit, does it have to be pre-existing here and I'm going to renovate it to do something else? Or could somebody come in and build an entire strip mall of storage units? Would they be the same?
So long as if we change this and say storage units are permitted in this zone, anybody who meets the zone requirements then is entitled to use it in that manner. You're not allowed to say, Phil can get it and Todd can't, or Todd can get it and Phil can't. So if it's permitted for Phil, it's permitted for Todd and Joe and Danny and Dee and everybody else. And we can't say, okay, Phil, it's okay for you to go ahead and fix your building up and use it for storage at this time, because we're going to let you do it, but we won't let anybody else do it. If somebody else wants to do something that's lawful, and he's doing something that's lawful, we can't tell one to do it and one not.
Right.
So that's really the issue here.
No, my question is, would that apply if I wanted to build an entirely new structure for storage units?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we take a vote on this?
If the Board of Adjustments approved it though, right, Jim?
Well, if we add it as a conditional use, and then they approve it, the answer is yes. But it's not a conditional use in this zone, to my understanding at this point. Storage units are not.
But there's a difference. If we list it as a conditional use, it won't be called a permitted use. It will just be called a conditional use.
It'll be a permitted use. It'll be a conditional use in this zone. Yes.
Well, what would he have to change what would he have to zone that little area of that property what would he need to zone it to be able to do that? Does
Well,
anybody?
he wouldn't have to zone it anything. We would have to agree with him that we change the text that we have to permit that use. He can come in and for anything. He could come in and ask that it be rezoned for residential. He could ask for anything, but it's not his choice at this point. It's the city council's choice. What use do we want made of that area?
Danny, to answer your question, I looked at the other zoning ordinances on the highways, both Violet and on 25, and highway commercial does not allow storage units. And highway commercial is really anything that's going north of like the Baptist church and mostly on Violet Road. But if you get over to on Violet where Dr. Lenahan's office is and the new drugstore, those are neighborhood commercial, and those do allow storage units. So to your question, could you rezone and spot zone for neighborhood commercial? You could do that, but to Jim's point, that's really never a good idea.
Well, the problem that I'm having with it is the area is run down, and this would be a functional use that would improve the visual appearance of that plaza.
Well, that's more a code enforcement problem than a zoning problem. You know, the area shouldn't be run down. It's supposed to be maintained in a certain manner, no matter what use is being made of it. That would be like, you know, if I don't mow my yard and it gets up about 4 feet tall, you shouldn't change it to agricultural just because I want to raise, you know, I want to bale hay. You know, you should come tell me to mow my yard. I mean, you shouldn't, but the code enforcement officer should.
Right.
Of course, I've got neighbors that'll tell me that anyway.
Time-wise, can we either vote or table it again, or what do you decide to do?
I said we vote on it.
I thought Paula moved to, did I misunderstand, or did she say she wanted
Yeah,
to?
no, I'd like, let's go ahead and vote on it.
Did
Let's
she
get
say
it
she
out of
wanted
the way.
She say she wanted a motion to deny the request?
Yes, please.
Good, I'll second it.
Okay, so motion to reject the text amendment was done by Mrs. Humphrey, seconded by Mr. Purcell. So this is again to reject the text amendment. Mr. Dusing?
Hold on, Sean.
Oh,
I
Miss
don't think
Miss
I,
Lowry pushed that one.
Yeah, that was me.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jennifer didn't say anything.
Don't get me in trouble with my neighbor.
My apologies. Okay, it's reamended. So the text amendment rejection, the motion was presented by Mrs. Lowry and seconded by Mr. Purcell. So let's go to, as we're talking, Ms. Humphrey, what would your vote be on this one?
I agree.
You agree with a yes? That we
Yes.
rejected? Okay, Mr. Roberts?
I'm gonna go no on that one.
Okay, a no, so you're gonna say no to rejection. Mr. Dusing?
I hate to vote yes on it, but I've got to.
Yes to rejecting, okay.
Yes
And
to
Mr.
reject it, yes.
Gotcha, thank you for clarifying. And Mr. Martin, what's your answer, sir?
No.
No to rejection. So the yeses carry, it's rejected. Okay, next topic.
As we move on, I think we've already discussed the CARES Act, the small business, the questions that, any more questions on that, guys? I think we answered who they were, and how much it was. Okay.
No, I don't have any questions.
So we can proceed with, okay, got it. That's cool. Thank you.
The response from Attorney General, I think council might have wrote a letter back last year. I did get a response to that, and they wanted a quote from me, and I sent that back in. That's where we're at on that.
response. Sorry, I'm just typing.
Mayor, you talking about, I'm sorry, I had to let the dogs out. You talking about the response from the Attorney General letter?
Yes, council sent one last fall, I believe it was, and they just now sent that to me, to get a, request or a response, and that's how that works, you know, they wanna hear from me as well,
Can we get a copy of what you sent in?
Alex, is that,
You can.
okay, yeah, we can get you a copy.
I think council needs that, not just me. Thank you.
Anything else on that? Okay. Any questions about stop sign replacements along with the street name replacement signs? Did you
I
get-
do. I have a question about that. Where was the money drawn from for the stop signs? Because I didn't see it coming out of like Harvesters, Greenview, things like that.
Oh, it hasn't, we don't have an invoice yet, but there is line item for Greenview, and some other neighborhoods that, money was placed in the budget for stop signs. Even if there were, that's public works, you know, that's things.
Right, right.
Do we have a price on each stop sign?
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions about the stop signs or anything?
What, just a ballpark percentage of completion?
All come in,
Mhm.
all the stop signs, stop signs, 20 streets.
About 20 stop signs came in, so many street signs, and how many you got up? He's installed 8, changed out 8, replaced them in Greenview, and put reflectors on them at Greenview.
Reflectors on the post?
Yes. Well, yeah, that was Greenview. So. Okay. Anything else?
Hey, before we get too far down the list, I did have those 2 add-ons from the beginning.
Actually, 3.
Well, I only had 2.
Well, I have 1, 2 plus 1's 3, Common Core.
Okay, give me a minute.
I'm back.
Left his windows down, so.
Yeah, then the rain came out of nowhere. All right, sorry. I can still run. It's good. Sorry.
Danny, you had something about the recycle bin before we.
Yes, good news. I talked to Brian Miles and Planning and Zoning. And basically legislative bodies, which we are being the city of Crittenden, we are exempt from all planning and zoning rules and regulations reference the anything that we like we do, like you said earlier yesterday or 2 days ago, you said that Crittenden's the city building's in a residential area, but legislative bodies are exempt from all planning and zoning rules. So basically, and nobody knows of any rules about having to have a fence around a recycling container. Now, garbage dumpsters, yes, like at Walmart or something like that, but not a recycling thing. So we're good. So we don't have to spend money for a fence, which is going to help the price down a whole lot better when we decide for a place to put it. I don't know if Mr. Dalton will let us go ahead and turn around in his parking lot like he agreed to before, or when the truck picks up and drops off the recycling container, but that's just something for us to know. We got a lot of stuff moving forward that I just want us to, a lot of people want this worked on, and that just saved us a lot of money at the fence issue. If anybody has any comments or questions, please ask now.
Don't we have an ordinance that it says it has to be a certain way? Has to have the fence, has to have the concrete? Has
No,
anybody looked that up?
I can't find any. I tore that book up last night. I couldn't find anything on it.
there's not, Paula. Trust me, I've been looking too.
Talking about the concrete, Danny?
Anything. Legislative bodies are exempt for all planning and zoning things, but there's nothing about how thick the concrete has to be, and that it even has to be concrete, because the one in Williamstown. Paula, did you go to the one in Williamstown and see that it was on compacted gravel?
I did, yes, I did.
Okay, so we're right about that. That picture's accurate.
It is.
Okay, so that's another thing that's gonna save us money. It doesn't have to be concrete. It can be compacted gravel. So we just cut the cost of that thing way down by no fence, no concrete.
Well, that's
Is it-
$77,000 difference.
Is there a KRS that exempts this? I mean, I just don't want us to get in a bind and somebody complain that we didn't follow the ordinance.
We're exempt, Kay.
Alex might be able to tell you that.
Yeah, we're exempt.
And Danny, you had something about a community meeting?
Say it again.
The meeting that you had this evening with the community?
All that right there was 4 things. I'm sorry. There's 5 people that came to this meeting. It was really great. Got a lot of good intel. We're going to use the Facebook group that's already been started. It's called Crittenden Neighborhood Watch. Is that right, Todd?
That is correct.
And basically, if you act silly and say obscene things, you're going to be kicked off of it. Of course, we talked about that if you see a crime going on, you call 911. You don't report it to Facebook, because police don't sit and watch Facebook all the time. But it's good information to pass on. Even talked about having to fix up streets or houses for Christmas decorations. And we might even be seeing some of those if we do the parade like we did before. We talked about the speed humps, not the bumps, but the humps. And we talked about people complaining about a lot of traffic in residential neighborhoods that need to be possibly addressed sooner than later.
Excuse me, wait a minute, I've got a problem with that. We can't use Crittenden neighborhood because I can't get on that site because I have been kicked off. So I feel that as all council members, we should be able to use a site that can be frequented by all of us.
Well,
Okay.
that's just a matter of adjustments.
Well,
By Friday, that'll be reconditional used. It's already got 258 members. So
Tell her it's not changed.
I gotta make some adjustments, but it will be up and running by the end of the week with total access.
This is something really going to be really positive for the city. This is one of the goals that I've spoken about for over a year and a half to get going for a neighborhood watch. And I'm glad that Todd has done a whole bunch of work to get this website started and has already had contact with the people on the country club and Greenview. So let's keep our fingers crossed and keep it going. But remember, the main thing, invite your friends to join us. But if they see a crime going on, call 911. Don't be the people that say, yeah, I saw that 2 days ago. But share the information on the website too. Thank you, Mayor.
Joe Dizzy has a few words about Oakwood.
I'd like to have a discussion, a brief one, about some things I found out today on Oakwood, and it results in some cleanup of some documentation for the contract going forward. And I want to talk to you about the contract strategy, which is a bit different than I think what the conventional wisdom of the council was. The first was the mayor shared with me an email from Rick Carr from Carr Engineering, the new guy who's going to be our field construction checker, if you will. And he got excited about the quantities identified in the $159,000 bid being significantly below what he counted on the drawings. And I spent a couple hours with Art Harden and later an hour or so with Rick Carr. And what he was looking at was the $230,000 scope and not the $159,000. So what I shared with you in the last meeting about the 9 drains on the highway and the 6 drains that go up in the right-of-way that are the low points, that is the scope. However, the drawings need to be cleaned up to reflect that versus the broader scope. So that's going to delay things a few days, and the burden on that is on Art Harden and Rick Carr to get that cleaned up, to get the final documentation to Alex for the contract. So that's just interesting info, but it shows you the level of complexity. But here's the thing that I don't think you know that was my learning. The contract strategy here is one of unit price and not lump sum. So let me explain that. This is not a lump sum contract that we have for the $159,000. It was bid on a unit price basis. So you might ask yourself, what the heck is that? Basically, Art Harden, and this, what I've since found out, this contract strategy is not one that I've used very often in my career, frankly, less than 1% of the time, but it seems to be normal for municipalities and for highway type work. So we've got a scope of work, we've got quantities, we've got drawings and detailed design, but the way it's bid is the burden is upon our engineer, Art Harden, to define the quantities of the various materials and then it's the contractor's responsibility to identify the unit prices to meet those quantities. So as an example, Art Harden defined the feet of pipe, the cubic yards of concrete, the sand, the blacktop, all those quantities, and then Brass Eagle has to come back and say, this is what I'll charge you per foot of pipe, this is what I'll charge you for cubic feet of concrete, this is what I'll charge you for the various fittings, this is what I'll charge you for the road, the drains by unit price. But the risk in the accuracy of that estimate really falls on Art Harden and not the contractor. So as an example, let's say Art Harden said there's 1,500 feet of pipe, but it actually takes the contractor, Brass Eagle, 1,700 feet to do the work. He is able to charge us for that other 200 feet because the quantities were identified by Art and the unit pricing he gave us to meet the contract. So I'm just wanting to set the expectation here. We do not have a lump sum contract. We've got a unit price contract, which is normal, but it's kind of shared risk. There's really no reserve and contingency within his bid. If Art Harden was perfect, and if Brass Eagle delivers perfectly on it, no issue. But we all know this isn't a perfect world. It's one of the reasons I don't like unit price contracts, but that's the norm, that's what we've got. I don't suggest going back and developing a different contract strategy because the dollars will go up and it would probably take a couple of months of rebidding. And frankly, we only got one fish on our fishing pole right now. So that's where we're at, and I wanted to explain that to make sure that you knew that you were agreeing and approving to a unit price contract versus a pure lump sum.
So basically, Joe, you're saying we're writing an open-ended check.
It's T&M. It's more like a T&M project than it is a.
We will have to measure his performance on how well he delivers those quantities, and we're gonna depend on, Rick Carr to make sure those quantities are accurate.
Does the engineer bear any responsibility, Joe, if if it turns out that he was more than just acceptable in the industry, off on something? I mean, has he got some E&O insurance out there that we might look at if it winds up that he was screwed up pretty badly?
It's a good question. I don't know. But he's got one foot out the door right now.
Well, he does, but his insurance company doesn't.
Yeah,
He's the,
the short answer is I don't know.
Is this
What was
where
that,
the,
Alex?
he's the engineer that designed the project and then ultimately sent it out for bid. So they're building his bid, or they're building his design. So if either one of them are negligent, and the build's negligent and or the design is negligent, we're gonna figure that out. That would go to Jim's point, is that if he did something wrong, now as far as the cost, I mean, it's all out there for anybody to observe and look at. That was the cost from the design to furnish the necessary work and materials to complete that project.
would this fall?
And I think-
oh, go ahead.
I think Rick Cards looked at it, a second set of eyes, and Rick has said, look, I'm okay with the design. I speak for Rick, he said, I'm okay with the design, I think it can be implemented, but the unit price, that's the language of engineers that I don't speak. So we're relying upon them to get it built.
And to answer Todd's question, the answer is no. We did not write a blank check. We may have written something that's going to cause a lawsuit down the line as far as either the engineer or the contractor. That's their problem to figure out. And if they got an insurance company, they're probably going to be talking to us at that point.
So this is not something that would be covered under the performance bond?
No,
Okay.
it shouldn't be. The performance bond's just going to ensure that he shows up and does his work.
The risk is if the quantities that are put in the bid package were accurate. The drawings look decent. He's got a good reputation, but I'm just saying, don't expect it to be nailed rock solid. I don't.
There's gonna be change orders, more than likely, right, Joe?
Yeah.
And there's got to be an acceptable variance in the industry, Joe. You probably are more aware of that than we are.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, what's the percentage? Nobody.
And there's always horse trading that's possible too,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
I just want everybody to know it wasn't a lump sum, okay?
So what is hey Joe, what is the average overage that's acceptable?
I think it's different by businesses and different by owners. In my former company, plus or minus 2% was whether you were successful or unsuccessful. A lot of other companies, plus or minus 10%.
Well, let's hope for the 2%.
Yeah.
So, let me ask a question. Does that mean we're not budgeting enough money in the amendment for the budget amendment? How should we play this?
I think we leave it just as it is for now, and we see how it progresses, and we may have to do another budget amendment if we see serious scope changes or serious errors.
Okay.
Okay. As we move on, we had, Todd, you had something about a phone call?
Yes, I had a phone call from Mr. Todd Mount, questioning the ability to be able to get an occupational license. And I'm just trying to get both sides.
Alex, would you like to step in on this?
I will, thanks, Mayor. Todd, I got a call from the mayor today about that, and I looked in the zoning code, and the zoning code, particularly in the zones in which I think the gentleman was operating, there is no definition for a transit truck or a food truck. So we don't classify it as that. So by virtue of that, it's certainly not a permitted use. If it's something that the council wants to entertain at some point to allow these transient trucks to come through, and that's something that can be looked at. But as of right now, it's not a permitted use.
But I believe last year we had 3 different mobile trucks. I'm not sure what the proper word for it. I don't want to downgrade the job, but we had food trucks. I'm going to use that because I don't know what the political word is for it. We had them in the city sponsored at the firehouse. And now we're going to go back and say you can't do it. We're right back to where we are with Mr. Dalton and his storage shed or storage facility.
I think it's the same conversation that we talked about before, the city being exempt from its own zoning ordinances, if that's the case. But I mean, right now, I'm looking at the zoning ordinance and it does not have a permitted use as a food truck, which conceptually means that if that's the case, then you can't operate. That's
Okay.
just.
Do we have a use or the okay for the farmer's market we have down the street? For uses such as that?
I haven't looked at that. I'm happy to look at that and research it. I look through the zoning code only as it pertains to food truck.
It's on county property, Todd, if you would like to check into that county ordinance on that.
But isn't that still in the city?
I'm confused by your question. What is it specifically?
I'm speaking with JD and he says it's county property, so that makes a difference.
I believe it is county property, so I guess the guy could put it on that property if he wants to. Because from what I heard about the situation, he's got a county permit. Is that correct?
I went through the ordinance book last night and I'm trying to define how this works. And no, I couldn't find where it said a food truck anywhere, because this thing was written way before food trucks were a thing.
It's in the zoning code, Todd. It won't be in the county ordinance book. It'll be, if you look at the zoning code and the permitted uses within the zones.
Okay.
Do you have one, Todd?
I do. Yes, I do. Matter of fact, it should be.
It looks like this.
Should look like this. Well, if I didn't have so much reflection, yeah, there we go.
It'd be great to get it on.
My thing would be with the whole situation is we have 5 food sources in Crittenden. And me personally, I've burned up all 5 of them. And